Welcome back. Some quick and easy wins this week, one of which being setting up the foundation of sort of a multiplayer layout, so split screen 4-way multiplayer just using a grid container, and that's a fairly simple process where you effectively just take the player, and as long as the player has a camera embedded in the player's node structure, so in my instance the player is called marble, like within the marble's tree structure there is somewhere around here a camera, and as long as that's there, the sub viewport here will effectively pick up the player's camera. By putting these in a grid container and specifying that it's column of 2, it means that you can very easily just remove and add players. Fortunately, as you possibly noticed, this bar in the middle was still there for single player, which I need to fix because it shouldn't be there for single player, but also at the moment it's more for testing anyway. The final game isn't going to have that bar there at all, but this is a progress bar that shows the position of each marble as it goes through the track. There's only 4 marbles at the moment, and so it's fairly easy to put those 4 there, and all they are is just text directs for each one. And essentially, as you instantiate each player has a like a texture logo, which is also the texture that goes on the marble itself at the moment, and it just copies that and it sets that for each one of these rects, which just has a shader on it, marble GD shader. Yeah, very simple canvas item shader, which just turns the square into a circle, basically. Pretty janky, but it'll do for now, and I just found that online. I didn't write that myself. I hate writing shader code. I'm terrible at it. I need to figure out how to get better, but for now that's fine. On to the important bit: how does that progress actually work when I have a track that is not in a straight line? So to achieve that, what essentially I did was create a path 3D node, and this just, if I zoom out here, so each one of these white points is a control point that I've added. So I just literally clicked and added each one of these points and mapped them to the track. And if we go sideways, you'll see that it does actually follow horizontally as well, the alignment of the track. It took about 5 minutes to do. And then once that was done, I did the same for the other half of the track, where it splits. I should probably install something that makes my mouse bigger, but it splits at this section here. I'll flag it on the video afterwards, and goes to the left and zips around up here, and they both end at exactly the same point, and I just made sure that the positions at the end were identical, and then effectively query the offset along the path. So what's the nearest, like it maps to the nearest position available, and it says, you know, return what my progress is on this path. And then all I did was made sure that I did a check first to see which path I was closest to. So in the event that you go to the right, it will make a check at that point, and it'll say from the bull's position, get the closest point to path 1, get the closest point to path 2, and then do a distance check, which one am I closest to, and then map my progress to that one, which means that as you fall from one track to the other, if you fall from one track to the other, your progress will adapt accordingly. So you go from being like 70% of the way through the track down to 30. So yeah, that was fairly straightforward, but it turned out to be not straightforward when I realized that there was actually a bug, and the bug was not in my code, it was actually in Godot's. So what you're seeing here, which I've just enabled, these green spikes, effectively each one of those is the gizmo for the baked points. So if we go back to the path node, you can see that the path is where I've put points, but there's actually like a higher density of points as far as the back end is concerned. Like it interpolates and calculates points in between each one. And these, yeah, because of the nature of Bézier curves, which I don't fully understand either, the gaps between these may not necessarily be uniform. I think they're not by default, by at least a small amount, but for the purposes of tracking progress through a racetrack, it's close enough. But what I was finding is that rather than it creating this uniform distribution of interpolated points throughout, the vast majority of them were crushed up at the start of the track, and that caused my progress bar originally to very quickly shoot to a very high number, which took quite a bit of debugging until I realized that it was not my fault. And so in those cases, as is always a good thing to do and a good practice to get into, I would recommend going to the Godot GitHub page where you have all existing issues and just search for your issue, like see if other people have faced the same thing. So in my instance, I was having issue with get baked points. So just typing that in, I could see that there were some open issues already flagged, as well as a couple of closed ones. And I could see from some of the open ones that there had been some very recent changes. And so I rolled back from beta. So I'm using Godot for beta 7, which came out last week. I rolled back to beta 6 and the issue went away, which is why I've opened this GitHub ticket of my own, just saying that there's been a regression from beta 6 to beta 7 and just explaining what that is with a screenshot showing the example of each. So the top, you can hopefully see that it shows that in beta 6 everything was correctly creating a nicely spaced set of baked points, but in beta 7 everything was crushed up at the start and it was causing all kinds of weird buggy behavior, and it looks like it's already been solved, which is awesome because that's happened. Well, I don't think it's happened. This person actually says it's been solved by another ticket, but that ticket was opened I think hours ago or a few days ago, so it just hasn't been merged yet. There's a good chance that in beta 8 this problem will be fixed, but for now I've dropped back to beta 6 or beta 5, I can't remember which, because ultimately there isn't that much difference for me apart from this issue, so I can work fine until beta 8 comes out. Anyway, so what does that look like going into the actual gameplay? And you're probably all sick of this music by now. Let me turn down my desktop audio before it deafens you all. That was something that I slipped up on last time. Oh, it's super quiet. Or possibly even off. Cool, works for me. So at the moment it's not actually true multiplayer. It is very much me controlling all 4 marbles. I haven't yet set up the controls. Oh, and then the audio pops in. That's a bit off. Anyway, so I'm controlling all 4 marbles at the moment, but what you should be able to see in the middle is that there's a progress bar as I work through the lap, and I'm currently controlling the front marble, this guy with the Australian flag, and I'm just going to show that once you get up to the top, so there's 2 paths and they're roughly equidistant, although do better. Whoops. But if you go up the top track and then say accidentally fall off, what you should see is that flag suddenly drops halfway back down the track again, because I've fallen onto a track which is no longer as far through as the other one. So that all seems to work for now. Yeah. And I still, unfortunately, don't have a finish line. That'll be next.